Okay, another aspect that we might want to consider is a opacity map. Okay, opacity map allows us to make things transparent. So we can do that in here as well. So what we're going to do is to come in, and we have our initial shader in here. Now, an opacity map, white is opaque, black is transparent. White is on, black is off. So this shader we have on everything, we're going to go in here and make this white. Okay, we need to make sure this is applied to everything. Okay, so it's white. Now we'll still see shadowing and stuff on it, but eventually what we're going to do is make this 100% self-illuminated, and it'll turn like this. We don't want to do that right now. Okay, we can also zero out our specular. We don't really need any of that. All right, what we're going to do is create another shader. So we're going to call this one our base shader. And we'll make another one. Just hold down the Shift key and copy it over. And we're going to call this one transparent. Okay, for this one, we want our color to be black. It'll just be a solid black like this. No specular, no glossiness. So if we pick an object, and let's go into our wireframe and get closer in on this. Now I've got this NURMS on. I'm going to turn that off so we can get to our base polygon. And let's do that for all of these. Okay, so as a matter of fact, our life could be easier if we just attach these together. You don't have to do this, but I could. I'm just going to attach these as one thing. That way I can get to them all at the same time. Now, I want to go in here and start picking polys. But what I want to use is this by angle. Okay, by default, it's got a big angle, 45 degrees. But if I change this to 15, then it's just going to get my base in there. Okay, so I'm going to hold down my Control key to add to it, and I'm going to take all of these, and then I'm going to apply this to it, which will make those all black. Then we want to put our subdivision back on this, and so I'm just going to put a mesh smooth on it, and let's set that to 3. And now this will render as black and white. So we're going to do the same thing under our rendering. We're going to come into our render to texture. This has got a bug in it. You see how my tools are not here? If you grab the bottom and just pull it, they'll pop back in. Okay, so we want to make sure we have our plane picked. Everything is still loaded in it. So all our settings are okay. The thing is we want to come down here. Now, we're finished with our normal map for right now, so I can put it back on later, but I was going to delete that out of there. And what I want to add is a complete map. We want to change that to our 2048. Let's come in here and let's change it from complete map to opacity. So this will be our opacity map. Okay, I think everything's great, so we can hit render. We'll get something like that. Then if we go and view our file, we get something like this. Now, this is not exactly what we want, okay, but it's close. What we want is the background to be white. So right here where this says element background, we need to make this white. Okay, now re-render it. And now what we should have, let's go view image, is a white file. Okay, now, can you see how we got shading in here? We're going to eliminate that, and that's where we come back in, and this needs to be 100% self-illumination. Oops. sure it's got the dotted line around so you know which one. 100% self-illuminated, which means that none of the light in the scene will affect it. So we render again. We can view that one. And now we have a white with black. Those blacks will end up being holes. Let's go ahead and save this. And then let's go over to Sketchfab and we'll load this in. So in Sketchfab, we have an opacity slot in here. So we turn that on. And then we click here. And we're going to load it in. And what you'll see is it doesn't work. And here's why. By default, it's reading an alpha off of this, and we don't have an alpha. So right here under format, we need to change this to luminance. Okay, and once we change it to luminance, now you'll see that that put holes in our object. So that's how you can have without actually carving in to your geometry holes, you can use an opacity map to create it. Some softwares like 3ds Max, when you use an opacity map, it looks at it automatically and it looks at the alpha, and if it doesn't have an alpha, it'll automatically use luminance. Other softwares don't do that, like Maya doesn't do that. If you load this black and white map into Maya, it won't show luminance either. You have to tell it to use luminance, and that's what you have to do in Sketchfab 2. You have to tell it to use luminance, not an alpha channel, to use that. So that's a way that you can add transparency to your object. Okay, I already saved that, so I'm going to open up the one before where I had our shading, and we can go back to that one. Oops. Thought I saved that one. I didn't, so I'll go back to my auto backup. And looks like I didn't save it. Okay. So we'll go back to this one, and it's no problem. All we got to do is to go back into here, apply this back to everything, and then turn off its self-illumination and turn it back into a gray. And then I can put my specular back in. Okay, now we're back. Let me go back and save that. Save as, and I'm going to overwrite to go back to that one. Okay, there we go. All right, then the last thing we'll start doing now is creating texture maps. Okay, so for that, we're going to go over to Photoshop. Okay, so now I'm in Photoshop, and I want to go ahead and just open up. Let's see, where was I? And we'll open up our normal map. Okay, we're going to build from the normal map. Okay, so we're open on normal map. Let's go ahead and label this normal. And then we're going to start building our textures from this. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open some of those textures that we shot with our camera. So I'm going to open up this particular one. This is one of my specific texture maps, and I'm going to use it for doing my surfacing. So I'm just going to drag this and lay it on top of here. Control T, and then I can scale it till I get it just exactly the way I want it on there, and I'm going to use something like this. Now, we have to decide some things, and one of the things we're going to decide is what color we want our object to be. So I'm going to make us a layer, and we're going to call this base color. And then I can pick a color. I don't care what color you guys pick. You can pick anything you want. I would tell you to try to keep it low chroma. What we're going to be doing is, our goal here is to do something that is like a metal surface that's been painted, and then over time it's starting to break down and the metal's going to be showing. So we don't want bright colors, because bright colors over time with the sun being on them will start to fade down. So I'm going to use something about like this. Alt delete will fill it with that, and that's going to be our base color. So what we're going to be doing with this is using it as a stain on the surface to get a textural attribute to it. Now I'm going to do another one too. I'm going to use two, and let's use this one. So I'm going to put this one on it, and this one will probably be a pretty good one for our initial stain on it. Okay, and I'm going to scale it a little bit too. And I like this little stain that's on here. So that looks pretty good. So this is going to be our stain, and I usually use a couple of them. So I'm going to say this is stain 1. And then we can use our blending modes. We can just toggle through this to see which ones we want to use to actually stain this surface. And you can go through to get whatever you want. What we're trying to do is get a subtle kind of blend on top of this. Okay. I think I might go with I might do an overlay and then pull it way back so it's a real kind of subtle. All I'm really wanting is a subtle breakup to this surface. Let's add a second one in here. Did I open two? Maybe I did open two. No, I didn't. Okay, let me open another one. I want to kind of make it more lush, and so I want to open up and layer a couple of different things on there. Let me get this one. Okay, so that looks good. Let's drop that one on. And then I can use a different blending mode on this one. Maybe something like this darken. I'm going to pull that down a little bit. So what you're trying to do is to slowly build this up. So I'm going to call this stain 2. To get some irregular nature to our piece. Now, a lot of times what happens is when you start loading these up, your saturation will start getting hotter. So what I'm going to do now is select the whole thing, copy merged, paste it back on. And on this one, I'm going to put an adjustment layer for vibrance. I'm going to click this button so it only affects that layer, and then I can pull down the saturation a little bit. So went from that to this, from this to that, because the saturation was getting a little high. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this out. Now you can save out as different file formats, but the one that Sketchfab use is a PNG. So I would go ahead. Okay, so we're going to call this one texture plane underscore base color. So that's going to be my base color. So I can bounce back over here to my Sketchfab. We're going to scroll up here, base color, texture, manage the textures, and then I'm going to load in my base color. And then there's going to be my painted surface. Very nice. Trying to get a regular dirty kind of a look. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so I'm going to put these in a folder together, and we'll just call that base color. So now I want to come up with a corrosion look for my piece where metal's going to show through. So I'm going to use this image to do that with. Now I'm going to duplicate this. Okay. And then I'm going to desaturate it. So we're going to go image adjustment, desaturate, because we want it to be black and white. So I'm going to put a levels adjustment level on this. So click this on. So it's only affecting it. And now what I'm trying to do is make this completely black and white. So the black area is going to be where the metal shows. So think of black as metal and white is paint. So I'm going to get us something. I want this to be primarily white with just a little bit of black. I'm going to stop right about there. That looks pretty good. Now, this is too grainy. I don't want it this grainy. So I'm going to go ahead and select the whole thing, copy it merged, and paste it back on top. Now what I want to do is blur this. So I'm going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And then I'm going to try to blur this so that I can kind of control get rid of some of that graininess in there. So something about like this would work. Now I want to go ahead and put an adjustment levels on that again. And now I can pull these in. And I don't want to get too much black. I want this to be like 80 to 90% white with just a little bit of black showing in. And then when I get these right on top of each other, then it's going to give me a hard edge. The white area is going to be the paint. The black area is where the metal is going to show through. Okay, that looks pretty good. We're going to modify it some, but for right now, that looks pretty good. So let's put this in a folder. And this is going to be our metalness. Okay, save this out. In actuality, before we do that, we want to select it all, edit, copy, merged, paste. I'll drag that in here on top. And then we want to do Control I to invert it, because we're putting this into a metal slot on our shader. And so white is on, black is off. So wherever I want the metal to be, this needs to be white. So we're going to save this out, PNG, and this one is going to be our texture plane. Metalness. If I can spell. So now in our metalness slot here, we click, choose a texture, metalness. And so what this is doing is, the way that a PBR shader is made up is anything that it basically has two shaders in it. It's got two materials. It's got a blend material, which is using for the non-metal areas, and then it's got a metal shader that's using in the metal area. And what this is doing is turning it on and off. So it's saying, okay, wherever this white, that's going to be metal. And anywhere that it's not, it's going to be a non-conductor. So that's pretty good so far. And let's go ahead and hit save settings here. So it's saving our settings, and then we can go back to Photoshop. Now, one of the things we want to do is we want to have a little bit of ridge around our paint so that our paint is a little bit higher than the metal. So we're going to duplicate. Let's pull it out of our metalness. And then we're going to make this into a normal map. So we're going to go Filter, 3D, Generate Normal Map. And this is a way to generate normal maps from texture, whereas our other normal map was from geometry. So if you go down here at the bottom, you change this to texture, then we can see our texture map. Okay, now this is way too thick and bulbous. Sometimes we want it thick and bulbous, but this is going to be kind of thin paint, so we don't want as much depth. And I don't need to blur it as much. And then I'm going to adjust this. Still too much blur. So we want something like that. So we just have a small ridge around everything. Okay, now this has the ability to invert your normals too. Now here's the way that I look at this. It's just kind of the way I perceive it. Right now, these areas, which are the metals, seem like they're coming out at me. When I turn this off, they seem like they're going down. Now, in reality, I want them to go down. This is what I want it to look like, but it's flipped inside of Photoshop, so I want to invert this. So in other words, I want my things that are going to look coming back to look like they're coming out at this stage. So I'm going to click OK, and then I've generated normal. I want to put this one on top of the other normal I already have. So what we do is we change this to overlay, and then we're putting the two together. Initially this looks fine, but there's a problem with this because it's laying the blue on top of it. The blue is the base, and then pink and green are pushing and pulling. So on this one, and we'll just call this one our paint edge normal. If you double click on the layer, here's how it's blending, and it's using RGB. I only want red and green. I don't want the blue. So I uncheck this and click OK, and now it's not adding the blue back on top. So now this will get us our paint edge to our piece. So we just going to save this out again as our PNG, and we'll just overwrite our normals. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and make a separate one. So I'm going to call this underscore normal. Call this edge where. Save that. So now we'll go back into here, and now we can bring in our normal again. So we go back to our normal right here, and we're going to bring in the new one. And now that's going to give me a ridge where the paint seems it's up higher than the metal areas. Okay, awesome. We're getting closer. Save that. And then let's go back over to Photoshop. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to generate our metal, okay, our metal color. Okay, so we have paint color, but we don't have our metal color. So let's go ahead and make us a layer, and this is going to be our metal color. Now metals don't have a lot of color into them, and there are charts, and here's a chart, and I'm going to give you a copy of this chart, and you'll see they actually have colors for metals in here. So I'm just going to sample one of these. Let's use titanium. So we're going to make this a titanium. So I can just sample that color. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hit Alt Delete, and that'll fill it. And there is my metal color. All right. So what we're needing right now is we're needing this as a mask between the two. So with this on, if I go over to channels, all of these channels, RGB, all of them are exactly the same. I need to select this. Now there's two ways to do this. One way is you drag this down and you drop it on this little dotted circle down here, and then it will select it. Okay, I'm going to do Control D to deselect. Another way to do it too is if you hold down the Control key and you just click on this icon, it's going to select that. So then I go back to layers, I turn this off, and now what I'm going to do is add a layer mask to this, and then what it's going to do is it's going to have me my metal color in my metal area, and it's going to have me my paint in my other. So now we're going to save this, PNG, and we're just going to overwrite our base color. So we'll bring it in. So now in our base color, we're going to replace that. And this will add in our metal color into our metal area. And so now we have metal in our metal area, and we have paint in our paint area. We have baked in geometry. Normal map as well as textural normal map. Now we can add a little texture into our other too, but for right now, this is okay. Now our roughness right now, if I pull all this down, now everything is totally reflective. Or I can make it totally matte. But what we really want to do is to be able to control that our metal area to be different glossiness than our non-metal area. Okay, now on this specular FO right here, this should always be up at 100%. Okay, and what that is how glossy our non-metal is. If I pull this down, then it's making this area more matte and this more gloss in here, which is fine, but we're gonna do that with a roughness map is what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and leave that up, and we'll just turn a little bit of roughness up for right now. I want a little bit of a textural quality in here to my paint area. So let's go back over and let's add a little bit of textural quality to our paint so it's not pristine. So what we can do here is we're going to turn this off and we're going to go on our base color right here. Okay, and I'm going to generate a normal from that. So we're going to select it all, edit, copy, merged. We're going to put it down here on our normal. Down here, paste that. Okay, and then we can generate a normal from that. So 3D, generate a normal. Change it to texture. And now you'll see that we're adding a little bit of texture to that. Now I can blur this a little bit, maybe make it a little bit deeper. Maybe something like that. And click OK. Now, we only want this on the paint area. So we want to use the same mask on here. So if I hold down my control key and click on this mask, it's going to add that. So go down here, click, add a mask. And now it's only going to add it into the areas, but you'll see it's inverted. It's adding it into our metal, and I want to add it onto our paint. So all I have to do is make sure I have that selected and do Control I on a keyboard, and it'll invert it. And so now I've got it going into the paint. Now we need to do this the same as we did the other one. It needs to be on an overlay, and we need to double click and make sure that we're not using the blue channel. Now this will add texture onto our surface. So let's just go ahead and bake that in. Just to overwrite our other one. It's fine. And now we can come in and we'll reload that normal. And now it's going to give me some textural quality in here. Now personally, I think that's way too much texture. Way too much. So all I'm going to do is go over here and turn down my transparency. So it's not as much. And then let's save that out again. So I'll tab over. Let's bring that back in. And that's better. Okay, so now we're adding some textural quality into here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Okay, back to Photoshop. All right, let's put all this normal information, let's put it in its own folder. Keep things organized. So this is my normal. Okay, so we have folder with normals, folder with our base color, folder with our metalness. Okay, this is our metal color. We're going to load this into our base color up at the top. So base color. Okay, the next thing we want to do is generate some roughness. And so we're going to go back. Let's use one of these stains. I'm going to go with this one. I'm just going to hold down my Alt key and kind of pull it up to make a copy of it. And turn that back to normal at 100%. And we're going to make this roughness. And I'm going to call this one roughness. We're going to do two. This is roughness for paint. Okay, so this will be our roughness map for our paint. So we want this to be black and white. So we're just going to go in here and desaturate it. And then we're going to come in here and start, as a matter of fact, I'm going to make a copy of this and work on the copy. And I'm going to add levels onto that. Be sure you click so we're only adjusting that. Now here's the thing in roughness. White means that it's dull and black means it's shiny. Dark. The reason people get this messed up all the time and do it backwards. You're putting it into a roughness slot. White is on, black is off. So white is rough and dull, and black is glossy. Gets people confused a little bit. So, and gray is a transition area in between. So I'm going to go with something like this. We can always come back and adjust it. And we're going to save this out as our roughness map. Go here, and we're going to change this to roughness. So now, instead of a solid into our roughness, it's going to be a map in here. So we're going to manage our textures. We're going to add the roughness in. And now what that's going to be doing is controlling how glossy it is. Can you see that when we're in here now, that parts of this paint is glossier than other parts? And it's also doing it on the metal. Now, I want less on the metal than I do on the paint. Okay, so I'm going to adjust my metal separately. Okay, this is looking pretty good. So what we're going to do is we can put this on top. Okay, so we're back to this one. As a matter of fact, let's use a different one for our metals. So we're going to go back to our base color here, and let's get this stain 1 instead of the stain 2. So we have a different one that we're using. So I'm just cloning that. I'm just holding the Alt key as I drag it, which will clone it. And so the same thing, this needs to be normal, 100%. And then we're going to desaturate that. And then we'll put an adjustment layer on this. As a matter of fact, I may keep that one initially just like this. I'm going to put a new layer down below it. And I'm going to fill this layer with white. So edit, fill. with white. And then as I turn this down, that white will show through. Okay, and then I want a mask on this one. So we go back down to our metalless and control, where do we have a mask at? We have it in our base color. So control, click on that. And then we want to put it on. So now, this is only going to go over the top of our, and we actually want to do the same thing on here. Go back to control, click on that, and we want it on the white also. So back to our, so we turn our roughness back on here, then that roughness, and see it's going to be a different control on top of the metal. And I think I'm going to do some adjusting here. And I'm going to put us another layer in here, which is black. So I'm going to do Control Delete, fill that with black. Actually, I think I want to fill it with white. Not black. Okay, so I can turn my opacity down on this one. So that's going to be a little more matte with a little bit of gloss to it. And then on this one, and it actually is, I'm going to put levels on top of that one, and I want it darker so it's more glossy, maybe like that. Let's try that out. Save as. Roughness. Roughness. So now this surface is a little more dull. My metal is a little more reflective, but it's breaking up too. We don't want surfaces to be just solid surfaces. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now, some other things that we can do is post-processing in here, which is kind of nice. Now, by the way, if we hold down our Alt key and we drag our mouse, left mouse button, you can move the light source. Okay, so how it's hitting your surface. I go for something like that. Now we have some post-processing that we can do, which is kind of nice. And what we want to do is create a bloom where light is hitting this. So we're going to turn this on. And you'll see when the light hits the really glossy surfaces, it blooms a little bit. This is probably a little too intense, so I'm going to pull it down a little bit. Pull my threshold down a little bit. So I want a little bit of bloom, but not a lot of bloom. You can turn it on and off to see what's going on. Make my radius down a little bit. Still a little intense. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Another thing that you can do is Vignette. That's where it makes it a little bit darker around the edges, which is what really happens with a true camera. And let's just pull it back just a little bit. We shouldn't really notice it. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now you can turn your post-processing off and on to kind of see what it's doing. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then we want to save a preview. And then save the settings once it stops twirling on us. Okay, while it's doing that, I'm going to go back over to Photoshop. Now, I want to save this out, this whole file. You can save it as a Photoshop file or a TIFF file. I prefer TIFF, but either one of them holds layers, so we can always come back and modify this. And so this is my texture map, or texture plane construction file. Okay, so we know the construction is where we are creating all our maps. So I can save that. So I can come back and adjust this later if I want to. All right, so this is kind of ready to go. It's looking pretty nice. So we're going to, at this point, we need to publish it. Okay, so I'm going to go publish. Okay, I'm going to go right here. It says got it, see my model. Publishing it means other people can see it. Before we publish it, nobody else can see it, but now people can see it. Now, the reason we want to do that is because we want to embed it into wherever we want to view. So like if you have a page over on ArtStation, you can embed this by copying the code. Okay, so what you have to do is go down here, click Embed, and then just click right here, just click, and it copied the code to the clipboard. And now you can paste this and you'll be able to embed it wherever you're going to go with it. Okay, so this last part will only really pertain to people that are in my class, in which that we use Brightspace. Okay, so what I can go right here is reply to a thread, and then we can put our viewer in here. To do that, you click this button, Insert Stuff, and we go down here to Embed Code, and then we paste that code that we copied. Click Next. You want to click this to allow, and then Insert. And Post. And then it'll put my viewer in here. You can view it right inside of the post. This is the same if you're putting it inside of a like ArtStation or a web page or something. Okay, but you can also come up here and tell it to go full screen, which is nice. Now, you can also have an inspector in here. Okay, so if you click this button right down here, it'll send you back over to Sketchfab, which is a good place, and we're going to expand it here, and I want to show you about this little inspector. So we're looking at this, fine. We can go down here and click on this inspector, and now you have controls to see different parts of this. So if I go down here and I click Matte Cap Surface, now I'm just seeing a matte cap, which is a kind of a medium shader put on it, but it's putting the normal map on. So you're seeing what all the normal is putting on here, which is kind of nice. You can also see your wireframe. We don't have much of a wireframe on this. But you have other areas that you can see in here, like I can see the opacity map. So it's only showing me the opacity map. I can look at normal map, roughness, metalness, base color. I can look at no post-processing. So what does it look like without the post-processing on it? Or I can turn it with the post-processing on it. Okay, we can turn that back off. Go back to minimize. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is to turn on your textures. So if we go back up here and we hit edit properties right here, over on here you can see allow texture inspection and turn this on, then save it. Now this adds an additional functionality which is nice for us to be able to deal with. So if I go back, I click on take me back over here again. Full screen. Click on my model inspector. Now what it's going to do is when I want to look at the normal map, if I go right up here and I hit 3D, 2D, and why is it not showing me? Okay, it wasn't working because I needed to refresh it. So here we go. So now when I pull this in, when I click normal map, it's going to show me my normal map over here. And what's nice is it has this little red part where you can kind of highlight an area. So if I'm thinking, okay, there's a problem with something, where is that on the map? And so I can go over here and you can see where it is on the map. So you can click on my opacity map, showing you that, my roughness, metalness, base color. So you can expect all those maps as 2D as well as seeing it 3D, which is kind of nice. Then you can turn it back to 3D mode and then turn it back. And there we have it. Let's see, what else can I cover? One other thing that you might need to do periodically is if you go into edit properties, you can re-upload your geometry. Okay, so if there's some reason that the model was something wrong with the model, you can re-upload it. Okay, and it just will update everything that you have. Okay, so that is creating your textures in Photoshop, how to create normal maps in Photoshop and blend those with your other normal maps. Let me go ahead and put this in a folder. Okay, and this is my roughness folder. Okay, then let's save that back to my construction file. And so roughness maps, metal maps, base colors, normals. There we go. That's your PBR workflow. Hopefully that helped you out. Thank you very much.